Chief Secretary for Finance. Sir, we extend a warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
Shri Samir Bhai Somaiya, very young, dynamic, and with lot of energy, and always working for the cause of promoting higher education and school education. The Chancellor of Somaiya Vidyavihar University. Sir, we are extremely happy to have you here and we extend a warm welcome.
Yes, sir.
And both the esteemed author of the book, Professor Rajeev Lochan ji, who had several positions in academics and from the Department of History, Punjab University, Chandigarh, and Madam Meeta Rajivlochan ji. She has been also, I would definitely like to talk for a minute about her little later. But both the esteemed authors, we are really obliged that you have accepted our invitation to have a discussion to understand and make the people know about this book which you have authored. I also would like to extend warm welcome to all the esteemed invitees and dear participants, all my colleagues from different institutions, from different autonomous colleges, from different other universities. And before I say a few words, I would like to briefly introduce all the four esteemed panelists to all our participants. As I said, Shri Sudhir Shrivastava ji has been IAS for, it's a very big tenure. Presently, he is a chairman of Maharashtra Pollution Control Board. In past, he has served as Secretary Home, Government of Maharashtra. He has also served in Transport, Excise, as Secretary, Principal Secretary, and Additional Chief Secretary, Finance in Government of Maharashtra. Shri Samir Bhai is holding degree in Master of Public Administration from Harvard University, MBA from Cornell University. He completed his Master of Chemical Engineering and a very versatile person in the field of education. I also had very good opportunities to work with him on few committees and always found him great. Is a passion for providing quality education to one and all in our country. Madam Meeta Rajivlochan, an IAS with Maharashtra cadre. Currently, she is Member Secretary, National Commission for Women, Government of India. She has held many positions. And in higher and technical education in Maharashtra, she has been the project director, RUSA. And there I had an opportunity to interact, take her guidance, advice on several occasions. And the all autonomous colleges, all the higher education institutions will always remember, cherish her contribution for the cause. All aided colleges with private management, it is only because of her that we could start getting grants from RUSA, Government of Maharashtra. Also, a number of colleges she motivated, encouraged all of us, to go for autonomy, number of colleges to go for accreditation, and the result is good number becoming autonomous. Many colleges getting best of the grades and working with a mission to provide quality education. Sustainability and all that for quality enhancement, and we all work for that. With this, madam, when this book came, you authored, we started thinking, can we have a session, can we have discussion on this book? And making India great again, I'm sure every one of us wish to see our country, India, the greatest. And you have rightly touched the theme. We also equally acknowledge and appreciate the presence of Professor Rajeev Lochan ji, who has been author of many books like Farmer Society, Facts and Possible Policy Interventions, Jal Swaraj, Pratap Singh Kero, and a man I have requested maybe next month, requesting for his time so that we can have special sessions with him in Department of History at our college and in University of Mumbai. With this note, once again, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guests, all the eminent panelists and invitees, participants. Before I request my colleagues, because they would like to ask few questions. They have also got few questions from others. But I would like to request Shri Sudhir Shrivastava ji for his opening remarks on the literary work which we are having. This discussion is all virtual, as we know. So all of us we are eager to listen the opening remarks by Shri Sudhir Shrivastava ji. May I request you, sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra. My warm welcome to all my co-panelists, to my colleague in the service and the co-author for this book, Meeta ji, Rajeev ji, Samir ji, and of course, all the present dignitaries and ladies and gentlemen. When when this book was to be first released, I recollect that Meeta actually called me and asked me whether I could be a part of the book release. And I said that, look, if I have to participate there, I will have to read this book. And certainly when I first had a look at the book, I realized that a cursory reading would not do. It's a work of immense scholarship. As Professor Chandra said, that this term, making India great again, is something which we all yearn for. All of us really have a great desire to see our country move ahead in the ranks of nations. And you know, the issue of greatness, there are many, many dimensions to it. And one could look at history from the prism of military might. You could look at architectural splendor. You could look at literary achievements. But I think this book actually deals with something which is very different but very fundamental, which is really in the heart of nations. That is commerce, administration, and governance. That's what actually day-to-day life and nations are about. The kings and their armies, they are important, but certainly what day-to-day lives of people really are about, that's extremely important. So this is a book which delves deep into this aspect of our history. And I think as the authors, Meeta and Rajeev, very painstakingly build a picture which is not easily available, in any usual history book. And I think I would like to pick up a few strands from what they have spoken about. The first thing that they mention is about, well, we were very prosperous, but was it that it was something which was done by design? Was it that as a way of life we pursued wealth? And I think all of us know that the values that we used to have was that संतोष सबसे बड़ा धन है, समाधान ही सबसे बड़ी उपलब्धि है. So in some ways, the pursuit of wealth was not something which was definitely a part of our daily lives, daily ethos. So in some ways, the prosperity that we had, as they point out, came by way of some kind of serendipity. That is, we were placed in history with very good geography, with very good natural resources, and at a juncture in history and geography where this prosperity in some ways came to us. At the same time, the other aspect which they have really very carefully talked about, that is about the role of the governments and state as far as commerce is concerned. And while we all talk about free markets as one of the most important determinants of progress, that's the present wisdom, they do point out that as far as those times were concerned, free trade was the norm. And yet, despite having some of the most enterprising businessmen, some of the most skilled artisans, and some of the most laid back kind of state, we yet, when we had this encounter with the European powers, somehow or the other we lagged behind, and we lost not only our political sovereignty, but also in the process were left behind in the race that all nations have for having a better life. So, you know, when we look at prosperity of nations, and that's a subject that has been of inquiry since the times of Chanakya, though Adam Smith is considered as the father of modern economics, but certainly we know that Chanakya also dealt with that subject. Then today's wisdom is that it is capital endowment, it is human skills, or it is innovation. All of these are drivers of prosperity and economic growth. But in some ways, that really kind of begs the question, because you really need to look at and find out why is it that some societies are more knowledge driven, they have more innovation. And I think this is that fundamental issue which they have very carefully culled out from a whole lot of history, historical data, research which they have carried out, and pointed out to the role of systematic information collection, converting that into data, systematizing that into knowledge, and building those systems which nurture knowledge which actually result in sharing of knowledge. I think they very carefully point out that it was these aspects that were missing. And I mean, the book is replete with so many examples. It is so rich in study material. And that is where the the Indian rulers and the Indian businesses, they actually somehow or the other were left behind by the European businesses and the European powers. Of course, it is also true that the European powers used a military muscle and military power, which was something not a part of Indian business ethos. So, as I said earlier, as the book points out, Indian businesses and the Indian government actually kind of lived, coexisted, but in different spheres altogether. So in a way, if you were to look at it, the most important aspect that has been pointed out is that you need some kind of institutions for collecting knowledge, for building that into systems, and ensuring that is shared across the societies. And that, I think, is a very, very important point which this book calls out and points out. And all of us in administration, in business, and even in day-to-day life do realize that information is important. But the effort of collecting that information and systematizing that into knowledge which can be passed on, somehow or the other, that has not been a very integral part of our ethos. Perhaps, as the book also in the passing mentions, that it could be something to do with the oral traditions that we had. We do not resort to documentation of our lived experiences. Or also it could be that in some ways there was some kind of a reluctance to share knowledge. And I think these are two most important aspects, that is collecting knowledge as a public good in modern parlance, sharing that and building on that, building institutions that will ensure that knowledge is created, knowledge is nurtured, knowledge is passed on. I think that is one most important essential ingredient for building a very vibrant society that innovates, rises up to the challenges as they come, and actually provides a better lives to people. I know that when you talk of a great country, the vision that many of us and most of us would have of great buildings, great infrastructure, about great achievements in science, and all of that is really a manifestation of greatness. But the bedrock of that is certainly trying to have a system by which knowledge is nurtured, which allows you to build upon what has existed earlier and allows you to create those great innovations. The book actually is replete with so many examples, and I'm sure that everyone would like to hear from the authors about their views. So at this point of time, with these opening remarks, I will stop, and I would certainly be very happy to listen to the very interesting conversation that I'm foreseeing the next 1 hour or 1.5 hours will give us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I request Shri Samir Bhaiji, the Chancellor of Somaiya Vidyavihar University, for his opening remarks.
Sir, Naresh Chandraji, thank you so much for your invitation. I am honored to be asked to speak today at this wonderful topic of the book of Making India Great Again. Sudhir ji, aapko mera namaskar.
Namaskar.
We have spoken a lot, and we have spoken also about how, how to make Maharashtra strong, how to make it strong, and there are so many conversations we have had. Madam Meeta Rajivlochan ji, I remember your visit to our campus as a member of RUSA. It was wonderful when you came to our incubator as well, and you challenged our students or incubatees how to, build and scale, if I remember right. And Professor Rajivlochan ji, again, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity, for allowing me to speak, inviting me to speak today. I think the book has a tremendous sweep of history. I think in that itself, the sweep of history that you encompass itself communicates a strong message. Whether it was Aurangzeb's conversation with the tutor who also tutored Dara Shikoh, and in that conversation itself, it talks about a knowledge of geography far beyond Indian frontiers. Whether it was talking about recording of the type of people Babar found in India in the Babarnama, whether it was how the English recorded their visits to India, it shows the necessity and the fun in recording history. I myself came across the first annual report of the company I run, which is Godavari, which was in 1940. And it talks about the delay of getting our equipment from Skoda, Czechoslovakia because of the European war. It's fascinating to read something written in that time, because it reflects what people thought about what was going in around them, which later, of course, became the World War. But it's fascinating to see and to have that documentation as we go forward. The title to the authors, Making India Great Again, it, of course, means that India was great once. Otherwise, the word again would not find a place. It was great, as you mentioned, in science. It was great, as you mentioned, in mathematics. It was great, as you mentioned, in nutrition. It was great in terms of a standard of living that at least afforded you the roti, kapda or makan. It was great, again, as Sudhir ji said, in Santosh. Jisko kachu na chahiye wahi shahenshah. That was Kabir's wonderful line. In talent, in health, you talked about rhinoplasty that was done earlier. And of course, in wealth, because money may not be the mission, but it certainly powers the mission. And so, but in spite of these things that contributed to our greatness, there were shortcomings that we let them either waste away, we let them be forgotten, or we let them be overpowered. Whether we didn't see threats coming, whether we didn't see the English undermine our education system, however it was funded and however it was supported, whether we didn't document what we did, whether it was the rockets or the steel, whether it was Tipus Rockets, as you mentioned, or whether it was not even recognizing a threat on the horizon, which you define as the East India Company. The poor coordination you mentioned between state and finance. You talk about lack of integrity, especially again when Aurangzeb talks about his tax collection systems and how there was no certainty or there was no way to, as you again, I repeat from your book, whether you had systems for capturing information, and then if you did capture the information, did you make sense of the information, or how did you make the sense of the institution? Whether, I think personal initiative is always necessary, the spark is needed, but whether it is institutionalized, whether systems are created so that not that the system becomes the mission, but again, system also should enable the mission. Too often, I feel in the world around us, systems which are necessarily created to further mission sometimes forget that nature of their being and become the mission itself, and somehow become almost a kaid khana rather than a bunyad, which is, I think, what the authors once again refer to. I keep looking left because I'm written notes on an electronic document, so I keep looking a little bit to my left. I think you mentioned about how whether we work with the government or with the industry or with knowledge creators in a spirit of partnership, does one enable another? As a quick example, we run a bookshop called Kitab Khana, and sitting outside the bookshop, I met a person from the legal profession who told me that he was a graduate from the mid 60s of our institution, and as this institution was only founded in 59. So I just asked him a question whether the Vidyavihar station was present at that time. He said yes, it was present in 60 or 61. He says he said that it was founded in 1959, and very quickly my grandfather went to the member of parliament and requested him whether, because the children at that time found difficulty reaching there, and within a year or year and a half, a station was created for the convenience of the students coming for education. Spirit of partnership, spirit of enabling a larger society is that there. Are our education institutions then and now, because when we say making India great again, I think the other sense that the authors are saying is we've become independent in 47. Are we on that path to make India great again? And if we are, and if that may be what we yearn for, are we taking the right steps in making India great again? Are our education institutions, and they strongly mention, are they meant just to transmit a particular syllabus that was created much earlier? Do they even bother to preserve or find or discover the knowledge that we had earlier? And do they aim to create, or even do they have the means to create the knowledge of the future? Can they serve to be a bridge between the past, the present, and the future? I think I can give examples, and I'll give a little later, but I think that it's a fascinating sweep of history. And I said I was thoroughly enjoyed Jagat Sheth and the way he worked closely with Murshid Ali, or it was fascinating to see Aurangzeb immediately banish his grandson to Patna when he thought his grandson was not being integrity to the responsibility bestowed on him. And I think there is so much learning to be made from the anecdotes mentioned, as well as the structure that the authors have brought together. So once again, I thank you so much. With this, I would like to hear the authors also in what they would like to give their inspiration and where they see this book taking us as a country in a journey to becoming great again. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Samir Bhaiji. Excellent opening remarks.
Shukriya.
And may I take the opportunity to invite Madam Meeta Rajivlochan for her opening remarks. Welcome, Madam.
Thank you, sir. Distinguished panelists and friends, thank you for the tremendous insights that you have presented today. Sudhir sir, with his considerable administrative background and huge experience, points out that perhaps despite the conventional wisdom that free markets are not the only important thing for economic growth, the role of the state is equally important in creating a level playing field, in providing equal opportunities for all to grow. And Samir ji has pointed out the role of knowledge institutions in creating and generating new knowledge. So yes, those are very tremendous insights. From our own point of view, I think one of the important ideas in this book has been that the key to economic growth is a learning society. A learning society is a society where people learn from their own lived experience and they learn from the experiences of others. The modern world, modern society is such a complex place that any one individual's experiences are not enough to guide him about the choices that life presents. And that is why books, journals, letters, and all these materials are so very important for us to draw lessons from. When we go back into India's past and see that India has had tremendous accomplishments, whether it be in banking, in mathematics, in iron and steel, and so many other things, the one factor which is missing and which perhaps destroyed all that we had achieved was that we were not able to create a learning society. In the sense, several aspects. One, that we were not able to document it adequately. The other is that we were not able to improve continuously. Having achieved something is not enough. Things are in flux, they keep on changing. Samir ji referred to the Tipus rockets which we write about in this book. Now Tipu Sultan in the various the Mysore wars, he uses rockets which were cylindrical casings, iron casings, 7 to 10 inches long, and they were filled with solid propellant, that's gunpowder. They were tied to a bamboo rod or to a steel blade, and they were used as rockets. When they were first used, they created a lot of dismay within the ranks of the English soldiers, and they were much impressed by all that had been achieved. Now, what happened subsequently is something of interest. The English carried those rockets back to Woolwich Arsenal. They worked on those rockets, and William Congreve was able to triple the range of those rockets. Now, that is something which we would call learning. How do you continuously improve on what you have? And that is something which, for whatever reason, we have been unable to do, whether we talk about science and technology or whether we talk about governance. Governance is equally important for economic growth. So when we look at the encounter between the English East India Company and Indian rulers, we find that while the English learned from the Indian rulers all the time, the Indian rulers did not. Today, there is a myth which says that the English East India Company was superior in terms of military technology and that the defeat of the Indian rulers was inevitable. But that is, I think, a matter of hindsight. When we go back and look at history, we see that there were some wins and some losses on either side. The one thing which stands out is that Indian rulers did not learn man management and finance management the way that the English did. Actually, about the point of technology, one of the historians who has written about this, Randolph Cooper, when he studies the Battle of Assaye of 1803, where the English defeated the Marathas, he says that had technology been the most important factor, the Marathas would have won the war. The English, when they say that the kind of cannons which the Marathas had, the English did not have. What was important was institutional mechanisms to win the loyalty of their soldiers. And this was something that the English did do. They worked continuously to provide for their soldiers even after the soldiers had retired. And they had created a whole mechanism called the invalid establishment, in which soldiers were assured that even after the battle was over, they would have something to go back to. These were mechanisms which the Indian rulers were never able to develop. So perhaps what the Indian rulers offered by way of pay and compensation were larger than what the English were offering. What they did not offer was this facility of a pension. This is something which the English worked out all the time, and we report it that this is statistics can and do beat guns. So this is the kind of thing, how learning happens. We should always remember that Indian businessmen, Indian rulers, they spent 150 years before the Battle of Plassey in interacting with the Europeans. They weren't able to figure out the implications of what was going on or to learn from others. So, friends, today, when we talk about modern times, we see that even today there are significant gaps in terms of being able to set up a learning ecosystem. When we talk about economic growth, that is what distinguishes societies. And this is something that American economists pointed out 50, 60 years ago, when they said that the key factor in economic growth, quite apart from land and labor and capital, is the knowledge residual, which they gave the name of productivity. And when they talked about this knowledge residual, they were only providing mathematical proof to something which Europe had known for a very, very long time. So how is it that today, even after all our experiences and 200 years of slavery, we are not able to build a learning ecosystem? I think this is the thing for which all of us need to put our heads together and see as to how a robust learning ecosystem could be built up. If we look at the impact that the pandemic has had, and it has wrought havoc, but it has also provided a lot of opportunities, and it has also highlighted so many vulnerabilities that we have. Now, the pandemic has brought forth the importance of the ability to supply medicines, and India has been able to supply medicines, but there are important weaknesses in our supply chain. Indian pharma depends to the extent of 70% or more on something called active pharmaceutical ingredients, for which they depend on China. So, and this is something that has been around, it's not recent, it has been around at least since the 1990s. So how is it that it requires a pandemic for us to sit up and to see that this is something which needs attention? These, friends, are not matters either of politics or of ideology. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, public discourse in India is dominated by politics and ideology so much that we tend to forget about these far more important matters. When the chips are down, it is the knowledge residual of a society, its ability to make medicines, its ability to make key goods, which is important for society. And I think even more important than technology or commodities is an idea set. If we look at ourselves today, it almost seems as though India is an intellectual colony of the Western world. A lot of the time, even for a paradigm of ideas, we seem to be dependent almost entirely on the West. On a seminal thing like democracy, Indian democracy has succeeded despite all the naysayers in the last 70 years. There were so many who predicted that India is never going to survive as a country or as a democracy. We have done both. Despite that, all the discourse on Indian democracy says that talks about why we have failed to live up to a Western model of democracy. But we have our own Indian model. Don't we need to look at that to construct our own narrative, to construct our own problems? And this is something that we see even when we look at research, whether it is pharmaceutical research, social science research, or anything else, that we tend to depend far too much on Western agendas. The need today, if India is truly to become great again, is to be able to find our own agendas, to be able to find our own institutional mechanisms and our own path to growth. It would be a very faulty idea which says that there can be only one mechanism which generates economic growth. Every country needs to focus on its own problems and develop its own institutional ecosystem to get there. If we are unable to do that, that would be a cause of concern. How do we get there? And I think that in order to make India great again, what Sudhir sir said, that in the past perhaps it was a matter of default that India was a very prosperous society. The point is today to make India great by design. The point is to build institutions which can preserve institutional memories, which can lead to economic growth. The point is to document our experiences in all walks of life and to use those lived experiences in order to learn from each other, to improve productivities, to improve efficiencies. Friends, I'll stop here and wait for Dr. Rajivlochan and the questions that will come in order to take this conversation forward. Thank you, Naresh.
Thank you so much, madam, for beautiful presentation in your opening remarks about your thoughts, so intellectual. And now we have an eminent historian and the author of the book, Professor Rajeev Lochan. May I request you, sir, for your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for organizing this thing. I am very honored to be in this august company for being able to share my thoughts on a large number of complex issues. I'm an academic. Mostly I work in a library or I am in my study, and the rest of you are people who work in real life, so there's a major difference over there. Except that when I notice the kind of problems that you guys seem to be facing, my access to your problems is through the newspapers and through the television channels, then I noticed, many of these problems are actually of very recent origins, and many of them have roots far deep down into Indian history. And like Meeta said earlier, if we were rich in the past, Bharat Sone Ki Chidiya Tha, this is a fiction that has been too many times. And remember, it's not so much of a fiction because you never ever have popular rebellions within India. This is something which people don't seem to notice. Unlike in Europe, where popular rebellions used to happen every few centuries, and major rebellions which would overthrow the kingdom, destroy things very extensively, bring the society down quite considerably. In India, we don't seem to have those kinds of rebellions at all. What we do have is a large number of people trying to assert themselves, setting themselves up as independent. Remember, even today, we have this whole identity politics going on. Me, my group, my small chota sa group, which is made up of a few thousand people, prosperous. The rest of the society can go and hang. This kind of creation of a small-scale society may have been possible at a time when India was very sparsely populated. Even at the time of Akbar, India barely had about 17 crore population. Today, we find that when the population has grown so much, when the resources are so much more scarce, it becomes necessary for us to sit down and seriously think, is there a way out of the dilemmas that we are facing? Is there a way out to ensure that there is the cake which Indians want to have is larger in size? Is there a way out to ensure that everyone's energies are synergized with each other in such a manner that it's possible for all of us to grow considerably without eating into someone else's share? Now, those were the concerns which drove the writing of this book, especially also because a large number of students with whom I interacted, they were constantly asking these questions, and they were wondering why it is not possible for Indians to set up things, to do things in such a manner that it allows them to move forward. Now, you have given the example of Tipu Sultan and his rockets. You have talked about Murshid Quli Khan and how Murshid Quli Khan was creating a synergies within the Jagat Seth. The one thing that you would notice in all such examples is that no one seems to learn from these successful examples. No one within India, no one within the neighborhood seems to think that these successes need to be examined further and need to be replicated on a larger scale, especially when they're fighting up with the British. Something as basic as this, from whom did the British take India over? The British took India over from the Marathas. The Marathas were defeated, and then the British took India over in 1803. And yet, what we seem to remember, because we have been made to remember it like this, is that the British took over from the Mughals. Oh, the Mughals had been wiped out by 1707. By 1707, the Mughal emperor barely had any existence, and by 1739, the Mughal emperor was of zero value in the country. And the British come and they deal with the Mughals. That sign a treaty of Allahabad in 1765, and everyone seems to believe that is how the British took India over. No, that was not true. It was the Marathas who were ruling India. The Marathas had the largest empire at that time. They covered the territory from the borders of Afghanistan to the eastern coast. The entire western region was under their control. Most of the south was under their control. So why don't we remember something as basic as this? These simple details. One of the reasons why we don't remember is, as all of you have pointed out earlier, because we don't maintain records, because we don't maintain memories, because because we think that our memories should be politically correct. Now, there's always this small problem: if we have memories which are politically correct, then we will ignore some bits of our memories. We will try to ensure that we don't remember everything that was happening in our past. In this book, what we have tried to do is we have tried to reconstruct that past from a wide variety of points. We have tried to find ways in which that past can suggest ways forward for us. And as Meeta mentioned earlier, the way forward for us would be to be able to remember our past properly, to be able to document our experiences, to be able to learn from our experiences, and use that learning to move forward to ensure that our problems of the present are sorted out. Something as simple as Samir Bhai is educationist, the college is involved in this. Something as simple as doing research. In the 1990s, we forget that in the 1990s, when we first moved towards this modern structure of education in India, we actually undercut research altogether. We said the researches done in the West are properly done, so we can always pick up examples from there. We can always learn from those researches. Indian researchers don't have to do any research. And if Indian researchers don't have to do any research, about all that we have 30 years down the line is the facility to ape the West, the facility to simply retell everything that the West has told us about, and to presume that that is the knowledge about India. During the COVID pandemic, we have discovered that no, that kind of knowledge doesn't work. We need to find our own ways for the problems that we face and how we go about doing that. Perhaps you people who are the practical minded people of this world, I would absolutely love to hear from you guys as to what you think is the solution. That's what I would say for the moment.
I, Dr. Maninder, am highly privileged to be in presence of today's erudite company to initiate the dialogue on the thought-provoking book, Making India Great Again. May I ask Meeta Rajivlochan, Madam, what methodologies of documentation needs to be still adopted by India to become a superpower, ma'am?
Thank you, Maninder ji. That's a very, very important question. And I think that's a question to which one individual is not equipped to give an answer. I'll try to provide whatever I can think of. And please excuse me for being a little expansive. And then we can put all our heads together and see. Ma'am, documentation, there's no particular methodology for documentation. Documentation is a way of life. All that it means is that wherever we go, whatever we do, we write about it, and later we try to learn from it and from the lived experience of others. If we go back into Indian history and we see, we find that information about India's past is very scarce from Indian sources. Why should be that the case? We have to look at travelogues of the Chinese, of the Dutch, of the English, of the Portuguese. We don't find Indian travelogues. And there is this whole myth which has built up that Indians never really traveled abroad. Madam, that's a myth. If you go back to the early centuries before the Christian era, we find inscriptions from Qusayr al-Qadim, that is on the Red Sea coast of Egypt, a place where we find Tamil Brahmi inscriptions in the Tamil Brahmi script, inscriptions in the Brahmi script. Later, off the coast of Arabia, we find the island of Socotra, which has inscriptions in the Kharoshti script. And this is 2000 years ago. As with the passage of time, the evidence of Indian travel abroad only increases. So why is it that those Indians who went there, who settled there, who did business there, they left so little information about whatever life they saw over there, about whatever business they did over there? And that was one of the weakest points that Indian businessmen had, their inability to document. We've talked about it in our first chapter when we talk about the encounter between the Indian merchants and the merchants of the English East India Company. Indian merchants were very poor in keeping records, and this was something which led them to losses which were considerable, and they were repeated. There was one particular incident which I would like to mention over here. This was the interaction between the Parsi dealers, the family of Rustam Manakji, and he was a broker for the English East India Company. One of the jobs which as a broker of the English East India Company he had to do was to bribe various Mughal officials in order to get their permissions, remissions of custom duty. As we have discussed in the book, this was something which the companies did all the time, and they needed Indian middlemen. So as part of this job, Rustam Manakji bribed Mughal official Ghazdor Khan, and he took a receipt. Imagine 300 years ago, working in that kind of environment, he was actually able to procure a receipt for monies paid to Ghazdor Khan. Then when he went to give an account of what he had spent to Nicholas Vete, Nicholas Vete asked him, "Where is the receipt, sir?" Manakji gave him the original receipt, and he never maintained a copy. And soon after, we find Vete telling the company that no, this gentleman, when he's saying that he spent 1,75,000 rupees, he's overstating the case. Actually, he spent only 40,000 rupees. He simply removed the receipt from the records. And after that, the Manakji company fought a case for several decades. The court case ran on for the next 50 years. The next generation of Rustam Manakji went all the way to London. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. Maybe you could say that, in the end, British courts gave justice to Rustam Manakji. Yes, but they spent so much money in going and fighting over there. And this was only one experience. There would have been hundreds of individual experiences now. If you cut to modern times, it was almost eerie. Last year, I was Additional Director General Foreign Trade, and I used to listen in to all the discussions of the various exporters. And it was routine to hear them say, each one of us makes the same mistake. We learn the same lesson in precisely the same way. And each one of us pays through the nose for the same lesson. So why don't they write about it? Even when you look at commercial business practices, there's a lot of it which is not secret. How to make a business plan? What's the common mistakes that you make? They can easily write about it. They don't do it. Or cut to higher education. Birla College is sponsoring this. I have spent so much time in higher education. I remember working a lot with Joshi ji on this IQAC, the Internal Quality Assurance Cell. All that the IQAC really asks colleges to do is to document their courses. What are the course details? What are the course curricula? What are the textbooks that are prescribed? And I remember the time when UGC asked this question, what are the learning outcomes of a course? That sent everyone into such a tizzy. How do we find what are the learning outcomes of a course? And it cannot be said that these kinds of things are only on paper. When something is stated on paper, it acquires a life of its own. It has its own reality. How is it that so many graduates of BCom courses are unable to read balance sheets? Is it defined anywhere as a practical outcome of the BCom course? If we were to define it so, then definitely it would make an impact. Or coming to my own biradri, my own comrades, madam, the objectives towards which we are all working, if you were to go to any department, ask 10 different people, all 10 of them would give you different versions of what the objective is that they are working towards. So there is no simple answer to this question of what the methodology of documentation is. All that it means is that you keep on reducing whatever that you do and that you experience to writing, and you use that for decision making later. So this would be my answer.
Thank you, ma'am. Very well put. May I ask Professor Rajivlochan, sir? Sir, I quote from your book, Shri Manikchan of banking house Jagat Seth had the wisdom that dialogue and policy support are important for business, unquote. Please comment, sir.
See, there's this whole fiction about free trade. Yeah. This fiction about free trade is key. You let the market forces play out, and the market will determine everything in the best possible way. When we market forces, how do the market forces work? A small example is from the time when we were growing up in tribal areas as children. In that area, they had something called a chironji dana. In Bombay, you get chironji dana at a very high cost. Over there, chironji dana was available from the tribals. You gave them in exchange a small pot of rice, and they gave you a pot of chironji dana in return. Or you gave them a pot of salt, and they gave you in chironji dana in return. That was open market, the working of the open market. That kind of working of the open market can be extremely harmful to people who are weak, who do not have knowledge, who do not know how to negotiate properly. Not everyone has that skill. Of course, that kind of open market allows people to be very happy with whatever the outcomes are, because उन्होंने खुद ही खुद वो decide किया था अपने लिए rate, तो वो अपने आप खुश होने लगते हैं कि हमें अपना भाव मिल गया. The problem that happens is when large-scale operations start off. The state over here, Murshid Quli Khan, is trying to figure out how to collect taxes from the people of Bengal. And remember, taxes were not agrarian taxes. Agrarian taxes were just a small component of the total income of the government. A large amount of taxes also came from urban areas, from trade, because India was not an agrarian country. Anyone who says that Indians are essentially agrarian people, sorry to say that's not true. Indians were essentially traders, essentially businessmen, essentially their genius lay in being able to trade properly. The state of those times, the Mughal state of which Murshid Quli Khan was a small part, that state had almost collapsed. It did not have any mechanisms to collect taxes. He allowed Jagat Seth to help him out in collecting taxes, and in return he allowed Jagat Seth the facility that if you give out loans to people, I guarantee that the loans will be brought back. This is something which the Americans were also doing approximately at the same time. There is something known as the Monroe Doctrine, which is from the early 19th century in America. The Monroe Doctrine simply said that European countries which have given loans to Americans need not invade any American country, because the United States takes the responsibility of getting that money back for the European country. This is about all. This is the kind of linkage with Jagat Seth and Murshid Quli Khan were creating for themselves. Now remember, this is a one-off experience. This kind of one-off experience is never generalized. People don't learn from it. People don't try to create synergies with others in a similar situation, because everyone else, all other zamindars and all other mansabdars are in a similar predicament. And yet they make no effort to discover how to do things better for themselves. And they remain in that small hole which they have been stuck. They remain there and they keep on cursing their life all around. There is an issue over here. And that issue is that if you allow learning, just like if you allow the development of skills on a general level. Remember, we are doing very well in athletics nowadays. We are doing very well in kushti nowadays. And all that has happened is that the state has allowed everyone and anyone to come forward and easily avail of sporting facilities. Today we had the khabar of Hima Das, the daughter of a small, very small peasant, becoming the DSP because she has won so many medals and she has broken so many records all over. That kind of a thing, generalizing skills, allowing people to use that for people to do. Take an example of computer learning. Nowadays, keeping data, you had asked initially to Meeta, how can we maintain data? Now, we really don't know how best data should be maintained. Maybe PwC, KPMG, Bain, these are the guys, American bhi hai, gore rang wale bhi hai, bahut paisa bhi charge karte hain. Maybe they can tell us how that is to be done. But perhaps we as Garib Hindustanis can also find a way out. Instead of saying that we shall give specialized computer training to a small group of boys and girls, that computer knowledge is basic to all school children and all college people. Now you don't need to sit down and start programming. Programming is not computer knowledge. Programming is completely a different ball game altogether. What if we simply start saying that every history student, BA History is one of the most popular courses in the country. More people come join BA History than they join BCom any day. BSc तो खैर बहुत कम लोग join करते हैं. BA Philosophy and BA History. These BA Histories and BA Philosophies can be asked to learn how to use computers, how to use the programs as simple as word processing, data management. You don't need specialized training for them. Just ask them to press the F1 button on a Windows computer and please read the file and learn what generalization of that knowledge, then we have dug a pit for ourselves, and all that we need to do is take the next step and fall into the pit. Perhaps that is where the educational institutions can move forward, allowing people to create higher level of knowledge at a more general, acquire more general skills, because that is the only way we will be able to find the proper, appropriate solutions to our kind of problems. Even the data solutions to maintaining memories, data solutions to maintaining information, experiences, वो भी वहीं से निकलकर That's what I would say.
Thank you very much, sir. You've really explained it well, like a true teacher. The next question, may I pose to Madam again? Madam, in your opinion, IPR, trade secrets, or shared knowledge, what impacts commerce most and why?
Madam, that's a very complex question that you have asked, since it pertains to the body of knowledge that any society has. And the body of knowledge that any society has would determine the course not only of the present, but also of the future. So I shall try to attempt a small answer, but I think this is a vast question to which all of us need to put our brains together. So, so far as the issue of intellectual property rights is concerned, there is no doubt that whoever has made any invention needs to be reimbursed for his efforts, and that is why IPR is a great concept. But at the same time, we need to remember two very important things. Copyright laws need to have a time limit to them, after which that body of knowledge, that invention should return to the public data banks. And the other is that very often it is a human tendency that we tend to look as the inventor in isolation. But any inventor in modern times, in modern science, does not work in isolation. Knowledge is always incremental. He or she will build on whatever has gone before. So it is critical to document what has gone before, to reference what has gone before, in order to have an important view of the sources of knowledge. We in the book, we referred at one point to this, the idea of the assembly line. Now, in popular memory, Henry Ford, the creator of the Model T, is credited with inventing the assembly line, but that is not the case. Actually, the history of that idea goes back to the idea of interchangeable standardized machine parts. Then that idea, which it was a French gunsmith who came up with it, Leblanc. Then it jumps continents to go to the United Kingdom. Then it jumps continents to go to the USA, where it is Ransom T. Olds who thinks about standardized parts for motor vehicles. He has a motor company. He comes up with the idea of an assembly line. What Henry Ford adds to that is a moving conveyor belt. So the intellectual ancestry for that idea goes back 100 years. And the same is true for all ideas. So in order to add continuously to the body of knowledge, what is important is that people should write about whatever work that they are doing, and we should develop institutional mechanisms to generalize learning. If we go back and look at industrial revolutions, when the point at which industrial revolutions happened in Europe is the point at which they are able to generalize learning. They are able to move it out of the labs and into various discussion fora, Vyakhyan Mala, and people from different walks of life. They come together and they work together. It's not just inventors, it's people who are artisans and who have so much to contribute. When we come to India, we see that knowledge worked in silos. We talk about wood steel in our book. We find that the artisans of wood steel had created a wondrous product, but they kept that knowledge very special, very secret within their families. They would not share it with anyone. Now, there were two consequences to that particular pattern of behavior. One was that in the 1860s, when after the mutiny, the British banned the production of wood steel, knowledge about woods completely vanishes in India. Till today, we do not know how it was that they created a product which India had made and sold to the world for 2000 years. The second consequence was that they were never able to upscale the production of woods to improve efficiency. So the real reason that woods dies out is not so much that the British banned it. The steel had already lost the economic battle. So over here now, this tendency that scientists, artisans, everyone has of keeping knowledge secret is something which we need to overcome. There is a verse in the Ras Ratna Samuchchay which says, Rasa Vidya Draham Gopya Matru Guhya Eva Dhruvam Bhava Vidhirya Gupta Nirvirya Cha Prakashanat. Basically, it says that knowledge is powerful so long as it is kept secret, but the minute it is revealed, it loses its power. Now, that is something which we need to overcome. We need to create mechanisms to generalize learning. Once we are able to do that, once we are able to build up a body of knowledge and increase the circles of people who are involved in knowledge production, that is how we will be able to give the maximum impetus to commerce, to economic growth, and yes, perhaps another industrial revolution. So that is what I would have to say to this point, and over here I'll stop.
May I add a small point to this?
Sure, sir.
That all this secrecy came from the fact that we never had any system to allow people who had created something to profit from it. The profit motive is extraordinarily important for human beings. Human beings love to profit. Even small things they love to profit. वो free में जो सब्जी वाला धनिया जब नहीं देता तो हमें बहुत बुरा लगता है. We don't want to pay the 2 rupees for the dhania, we want it for free. That is the special profit that we get. What we need to do therefore is, and this is where the state steps in, this is where the IPR ideas come in. The state is the one which would provide us with protection to our IPR. The society will have to learn to respect that ideas which belong to someone else, they need to be acknowledged. Something as simple as writing a term paper in school or in college, a seminar paper or a small research project in which we simply copy stuff from here and there, and we do not even acknowledge from where we have got these ideas. We don't put a bibliography, we don't put footnotes. We absolutely refuse to even follow the basic principles that have been generated in the West on how to give credit to someone else for the ideas that they have. Now, there's a small offside to this. On the one side, we don't give credit to people from whom we are borrowing ideas, and on the other side, we don't know which are the good ideas that we have. So it's a two-way thing. Now, हमें ये मालूम है कि हम कहाँ अच्छे हैं, ना हमें ये मालूम है कि हम कहाँ से चीजें borrow कर रहे हैं. And if we do not allow people to profit from what ideas they have generated, chances are that the generality of humanity, the generality of Indians will not be interested in creating new ideas. Therefore, perhaps one of the ways that we can strengthen IPR, because the state will have to perform its duty separately, but there's a small portion where we can contribute as teachers and educationists, and that is by asking our students to acknowledge the sources from which they have got ideas. Simply insisting that no term paper, tutorial, homework will be taken in unless it is properly referenced. A school child can also start referencing things properly. That's what they do in Videshon mein, Angreji deshon mein. Why can't our children learn how to do these things? Respect other people's ideas, respect other people's property, and do not presume that other people's intellectual property is for ours to use without acknowledgement. Maybe that is a small step that we can practically insist upon in our schools and colleges.
Very well said, sir. Plagiarism is something which needs to be really attacked and questioned at every level, even at primary school level, as you rightly mentioned. To carry on the discussion further, may I request my colleague, Mr. Kiran Raikar, to ask few questions which has come his way through various deliberations. Please, sir.
Thank you, Manila, for giving this opportunity for furtherance of this program. Once again, very good evening, everyone. being a librarian, it's a very proud and happy feeling to be part of this book discussion. I'm also happy to share that we have this book in our library, and it is a great value addition, and that has enriched our library collection. To begin with, I would like to compliment both the authors for bringing out this enlightening book at a very reflective and an appropriate time in the present global scenario. It's very interesting to listen from the eminent writers and the panelists about the views on the different aspects of the book so far. To take this discussion further, let me ask the first question to Meeta Rajivlochan, madam. Madam, endowment funds and philanthropy for science and universities is a rarity. So how we can improve the same?
Thank you, Kiranji. Kiranji, my response would be that in order for philanthropy to become much more common, I think that it is very important for bridges to be built between knowledge institutions and the remaining society. Actually, knowledge agendas need to be determined by the society where that knowledge institution is located. And if in our society those bridges are so weak, then perhaps one reason might be that colleges do not interact sufficiently with their own alumni. I remember back when I was there in the higher education department in some of the colleges of South Bombay, when I asked them, how often do you meet your alumni? One very, very prominent college told me, oh, we organized an alumni meet once in 50 years. So why is that the case? Aren't your alumni the most important resource persons for you? So I think that this is something which I would request Samir ji also to contribute. From where I look at it, I think that if these knowledge institutions and surrounding society would interact much more, you might see a considerable increase in numbers.
We also need to make a change in the way academics think. Academics think that they should not indulge in practical kind of things. Research, the only research which has any value for society is practical research. The only research which should be allowed at the moment in India is research which has practical outcomes. Merely to say, I'm doing a philosophical research which is so theoretical that it makes no sense to anyone other than I, that should not be allowed, especially if public monies are involved. Researchers should be asked, please explain what is the practical utility of whatever research you are doing, whether you are adding to another body of research, whether you are providing a new insight into society. Research which is not of social value, research which is not of economic value, that should be sent to the background for the moment. You remember in our book we have mentioned that Indians as scientists had discovered the distance between the sun and the moon, the distance from the earth to the moon, the distance from earth to the sun. So what did they do with this? They did nothing. Indians, we have been told again and again, शून्य खोज हो गया था, शून्य हुआ था हमारे यहाँ, and by the 8th century, the shunya is already available on various inscriptions also. The shunya is being used in the early years of the present era. शून्य की खोज करके हमने उसका क्या किया? हमने बस ये सोचा कि देखो कैसा अच्छा दिखता है, बिल्कुल गोल है, ना इसका आदि है ना इसका कोई अंत है. यदि शून्य का ना आदि है अंत है, that is the only thing that we have been able to figure out about the शून्य. हमें अपना दिमाग इस्तेमाल करना पड़ेगा और दिमाग को थोड़ा सा फिलॉसफी से नीचे लाके प्रैक्टिकल यूटिलिटी की बातें करनी पड़ेगी. That is what I would say.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir, for your insights on this question. My next question to Professor knowledge as a means to an end. How relevant is this axiom for your plea?
Could you say again? I couldn't hear your question.
Yeah, knowledge as a means to an end. How relevant is this axiom for youth of India?
Knowledge. I just said something. I preempted your question in a small way. Knowledge has to have a practical utility. But American knowledge is considered to be very powerful. Americans produce the largest number of Nobel laureates. Americans Europeans do a wide variety of things which transform society. Americans do that kind of research, which ensures that while the Americans are obtaining a tremendous amount of money for themselves, they're earning a lot of money. The Chinese who are converting that knowledge into something of practical utility, those Chinese are able to get just about $1 out of that $600, $900 Apple iPhone that the Americans have designed. That is the kind of thing which is important in knowledge. In knowledge, we have to remember the American system of knowledge has become so powerful today because that American system of knowledge had started being practically oriented long ago. For a very long time, it was believed that it was in the Second World War that the Americans started converting their knowledge into practical directions. But now researches have been done more extensively on the American systems of knowledge, and it is being discovered that as early as the 1870s, the time when the Americans had switched their colleges and universities away from the Christian church and had made them secular, they had started doing practical researches as early as then. Even history researches, anthropology researches, sociology researches, of course, the researches in economics and researches in all the sciences, they need to have a practical value. They need to have an end, a material end. Whatever the material end may be, whether that material end is how to destabilize a government, the toolkit is perfectly all right. Just don't borrow it from America, create your own toolkit. If you want a revolution, please have a revolution according to Indian terms and conditions. If you bring about a revolution according to Soviet terms and conditions, there's a high possibility that your revolution is going to fail completely. Now that is something which all researchers need to be told, especially if researchers are working on the basis of public monies. The researchers have to be told, please do research which has a material end to it.
Thank you, sir, for this your explanation on the equalization of knowledge and the message for the young research. So another question to you, sir. Which visibility markers are required to consolidate our artisanship and intellectual capacities in world trade?
Meeta, would you take that?
Yeah. Could you repeat what visual markers? Come again, Kiranji?
Which visibility markers are required to consolidate our artisanship and intellectual capacities in world trade?
Sir, so far as commerce is concerned, the only thing that really matters is the quantum of money that you earn. You know that in the last few 2-3 decades, we have come up with this whole idea of PPP, purchasing power parity. But actually, when you look at it in terms of money, economy, commerce, it's not the PPP which matters. What matters is how much does one human being earn? Is that enough for his needs? And when we look at commerce and the GDP, the fact is that if you compare, for instance, these days with China looming so large on the horizon, a comparison between Indian and Chinese GDP becomes very, very common. In the 1990s, Chinese GDP was just 1.5 times Indian GDP. But China began to think for itself. China built up their own learning ecosystems. They moved ahead. By 1999, in the next 10 years, their GDP was more than 2.5 times that of India. And by 2006, I think, or 2007 or thereabouts, their GDP became 5 times the Indian economy. And they've maintained their lead in the last 14 years. So what is the visual marker? The visual marker is what is the sum total value of the goods and services that your economy produces. Is it enough for those who participate in that economy? If you were to look at your MSMEs, today the average Indian MSME, the micro, small and medium enterprises, their average earning in the year is something like 5 to 6 lakh rupees. And given that there are not more than 2 to 3 people employed in those MSMEs, what that means is that barely earning subsistence level wages. We need to improve productivity, we need to improve efficiency, and those would be the most important markers.
Thank you, madam, for your thoughts on this question. We are coming to the end of this question, but I would like to ask one final question, which actually Vijay Joshi sir wanted to ask about this. So this is a question for all the panelists. So everybody can add to this question. What are the key takeaways from Indian history that will cause sea change in education, economics, and science and technology in India?
One of the things that I could add is that history is something to do with memories. Without memories, human beings find it almost impossible to exist. So whether we like history or not, whether we think it's a theoretical discipline or not, we would need to understand that without history, we are not moving forward anywhere. We need to, however, create our history from our own point of view, our history from our own, with our own concerns. This whole simple thing about, say, whether India was a nation or not. Now, if India was not a nation till 1947 and the British created India as a nation, this is one of the big arguments that we have stated by many people who talk about India. Bharat tere tukde tukde honge, ye wala jo statement hai. This statement is essentially rooted in that understanding which says that India wasn't a nation till 1947. Now, we will have to understand that there were no nations in the world till a few hundred years ago. And nations, every nation, whether it is China, whether it is France, whether it is Italy, whether it is Germany, whether it is Britain, every nation came into being as a consequence of a bunch of people coming together and saying, okay, we'll stay together and we'll work together. The Chinese, for example, have rewritten their entire history from their own point of view. And the Chinese say, this word, for example, Han Chinese dominate. Han simply is the equivalent of Arya. हम हिंदुस्तानी में संस्कृत में जिसको आर्य शब्द है, that's about all that Han means. It doesn't mean anything more than that. The cultured, the superior people, the literate people, those are the Hans. So the Chinese simply insisted that they would not depend on the British or the Americans or the French to write their history. They would write their own history. They will try to create their own memories. And those memories are memories of China being a great nation. A little while ago, Mr. Shyam Saran, who used to be India's foreign secretary, he had talked about how even in 1948-49, when China was just about to become independent, China had started talking about how China was going to be a great nation. In India, when we came out with a book titled Making India Great Again, people laughed and said, "Arey, India to kabhi great tha hi nahi, aage kaise great ho sakta hai?" Now, really, that is not the way to think for Indians. History would be of use if history changes our mindset, makes us more positive, makes us understand our problems. Hindu, Musliman, Sadev, Sage, Bhai, Bahan ke jaise rehte the. Excuse me, that was not the case. Understand that our ancestors fought with each other in a most vicious fashion. Now, to simply recognize that there were fights in the past, that doesn't mean that we'll start fighting with each other today. और एक दूसरे को humiliate किया करते थे. Of course, our ancestors were seriously bad people, but we need to learn how to become one big memory that history can create for us. And I think historians should be coming forward to recreate those memories, to rewrite the history of India, and to allow us to have a positive opinion about how India can be great, rather than how India can be an image of Britain, an image of America, or an image of France.
My answer, Kiranji, would be from a slightly different perspective, that the key takeaway, there are many takeaways, but key takeaway, Joshiji, would be that in India we need to build robust institutions, especially institutions of learning. This has been one of the weakest points that India has had, and perhaps the main reason why we were so vulnerable to the East India Company and to colonialism was that we did not develop robust knowledge institutions of our own. When societies go through crises of any kind, it is institutions that help to preserve those memories. And in the book, we give the example of ISRO. ISRO was devastated by a spy scandal. completely engineered by foreign powers. India was on the verge of building a cryogenic engine, and they came up with a completely apocryphal story about Indian scientists having sold a technology which, by the way, had not even been developed to foreign powers. For the next 10 years, the Indian space program went into on the back burner. But because there was an institution, they were able to come back together, emerge from that huge loss of face, and they came back and they were able to develop a cryogenic engine. So I think, and here I would look particularly at our knowledge institutions. They have all the opportunities which the new education policy offers them, but they will have to come out and grasp it with both hands, and the state must learn to cut back and must learn to allow institutions to work according to local agendas, whatever those agendas might be. I remember in one of the discussions on the American colleges, somebody was saying in irritation that, there's an American college which has said that our community insists that the value of pi should not be 22 divided by 7 because it's too complicated for people to remember. Children cannot remember this value of pi. We will fix the value of pi. So I would say that yes, okay, if a college somewhere wants to do something so absurd, well, go ahead, allow them to do it. It's all right. They will find out in the next 5 years whether their children are going to get any jobs. But that is a decision for that college, that university to take. Why do we have these national pharmaceutical association? I think we have 16, 17 national associations which dictate curricula. Why should we do that? We need to remove those restraints and we need to allow institutions to function, and colleges should do the most that they can to utilize that opportunity to go forward and to create their own knowledge agendas. That would be my recipe to make India great again.
Joshi, I think, can I just come in this last one bit?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, I think the very important takeaway that is there for all of us is that we need to be a knowledge-driven society. And unless we nurture knowledge which is already there and create new knowledge, which is the harbinger of innovation and of growth, I think the yearning that we have of making our country great again, that would remain a yearning and not a reality. So the important thing is that we should be a knowledge-driven society. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, Professor Vijay Joshi, Mr. Raikar, you want to say? Please say, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to. So Vijay Joshi, sir, is there. So I took the question. I initiated the question, sir. So if you want to have further discussion, you can please join. Vijay Joshi, sir.
I think I was not allowed to speak because my mic was muted. Samir, I want to speak something.
I just wanted to add my comments to this question. I also concur with the panelists. My only point is, and this is said before, I think we should be open to learning from everyone, including the West, the East, the North, the South. But we should be very careful not to build ourselves in their image. So, if there is a rush to say, ठीक है, हम कहाँ से degree कहीं और से भी दे सकते हैं, I'm not sure necessarily that is the way to build our own capabilities, our own capacities. We need to build ourselves. As if we are to be a learning society, किसी एक विद्यापीठ की मालिकी छोड़कर, गुलामी छोड़कर किसी और विद्यापीठ की गुलामी स्वीकार तो नहीं करनी हमें. We have to take our own. We have to build ourselves. That is one. The second thing, for example, when we say how we grow forward, if I look at the constructs that we have, which were meant to facilitate. So for example, agriculture education is under Ministry of Agriculture. Other education is under Ministry of HRD, and medical education would be under there. I think these were meant to facilitate the creation of systems. In today's day and age, we have to really look at, and of course the NEP, National Education Policy, articulates that, but whether these structures need to converge together to create that kind of environment. And we need to have, again, a facilitative environment. We've had a pandemic with us. Are we documenting what the pandemic did, how it grew, what our response was, whether it was a public policy response, whether it was a medical response, whether it was a research response, so that if there is a pandemic that comes again, maybe 100 years from now or 5 years from now, are we better equipped to our learning from this one so that we know how we can do? I mean, I still remember in this pandemic speaking to Sudhir ji regarding sanitizer building permit. I mean, can we work in that spirit of partnership, that I can talk to somebody in the government and the government can talk to somebody in industry to make sanitizers? I mean, I'm just saying, do we put all of this together? Again, talking to each other in a sense of enablers, partners, and really learning from our current realities and building knowledge systems ourselves. Learning from the best, but not necessarily, following.
Thank you, sir. So we are concluding the question answer session. And I thank all the panelists, the authors, for giving their insights and sharing their thoughts on all the questions. So I would now request our respected director, sir, Naresh Chandra sir, to continue this discussion further.
I thank you very much, all of you. I was just thinking कि भारत हमारा देश सोने की चिड़िया थी और फिर से सोने की चिड़िया बने, इसके लिए इस बुक से हमें शुरुआत करनी है. मतलब today's session, I want to request both the esteemed authors that this should create a spark in all of us to take it forward. And very rightly said by Meeta Madam, that through learning ecosystem, or as Samir bhai was also, Sudhir Shrivastava ji was also making a reference, that through education, we can take it forward. And we will definitely try to work in that direction, right from present situations. May I ask one last point before I forward it to Dr. Avinash Patil for his vote of thanks and few remarks. To Madam Meeta ji, can you speak for 2-3 minutes on National Education Policy 2020? And I'm sure Professor Lochan ji must have started working on it, that there may be another volume, NEP and Making India Great Again, or something like that. So can you, Madam, comment on National Education Policy and how you perceive in getting it implemented in our higher education system as well as in the school education system? May I request?
Yes, Naresh ji, I would only say that I think that the NEP is a marvelous document and that it offers a whole lot of opportunities to knowledge institutions to move forward. But the success of any such policy initiative depends in the end on how it is translated on the ground and how knowledge institutions respond to the opportunity that has been made available to them. The initiative lies with them, and to what extent they will be able to move forward will determine the success or failure of this policy. But for more, I think I would request my better half. He is the educationist, so I think I would really like to know what he thinks about the NEP. Rajeev
Yes,
ji,
please, Professor Rajivlochan.
You see that there's nothing new about the NEP. That's one very important thing we should remember. The NEP, the main suggestions of the NEP have been in the pipeline from the side of the government for at least 30 years now. For 30 years, people who have been working within the government and people who have been talking about education have been saying again and again, please liberate the student. Please liberate the student and allow the student to learn what the student wishes to learn. The NEP merely makes it converts it into an institutional format, saying that the student can pick up any subject. If the student wishes to read history as one course, philosophy as a second course, physics as a third course, why do you wish to say that the student should only learn PCM, PCB, or something like that? Leave the student free to determine what the student is capable of and allow the student to study. This limit that we say ki so many for so many students there should be so many number of teachers and there's an upper limit to the total number of class, that's totally bogus. We already know that a large number of colleges and universities have classes as large as 125 packed in a small room with one teacher without the help of a microphone teaching. So why don't we simply say open it up for everyone to study, and those who and the freedom that the student has to study, that allows the student to build a lot of interest in whatever they are studying, then they have a sense of responsibility towards that, and the university, the college, the degree giving institution merely needs to evaluate them whether they have acquired enough knowledge. And then please ensure that the knowledge that is, the certification that is given out, the degree that is given out only to deserving people, to people who actually pass a reasonably high standard of learning, which effectively also means something which Meeta has mentioned earlier. You will have to liberate the teacher also, you will have to liberate the college, you will have to liberate the university. You would be aware of the recent institution of Excellence Wala scheme. The institution of Excellence Wala scheme was nothing but an effort on the side of the government to liberate people. There was no money involved in it. The 100 crore rupees that they were giving out was a bare 1 or 2% of whatever the budget of the university would have been. The main thing was that it was liberating the university from the clutches of the UGC. Please understand that students, teachers, managements are themselves responsible for the outcome that they create, and that they are not interested merely in exploiting everyone all the time or squeezing out the students. Give them the liberty to teach what they can teach. Give the student the liberty to study what the student wants to study. That would be the best outcome of the NEP, if the NEP is actually followed in its spirit, because that is the spirit which has been there for the last 30 years, and we need to put it in place now. And this effectively also means that the Department of Education really needs to be wound up. It just needs to be a department which oversees things, and not a department which directs everything in micro detail on kya padhana hai, kaise padhna hai, course kya banna hai, things like that.
So true. And looking at the time, actually we should have some more time for discussion. But we have already planned that way, so we would like to come towards the end of the program while appreciating you all, sirs and madam. May I request Principal Dr. Avinash Patil to take it forward.
Good evening, everyone. It was a wonderful evening, and the discussion with the intellectual panelists has been enjoyed by one and everyone, and we know that the discussions during this panel discussion, the people will cherish for their lifetime. We have come to the end of the program, and I wish to propose a vote of thanks. So respected Shri Sudhir Shrivastava ji, the Chairman, Maharashtra Pollution Control Board, Shri Samir Somaiya ji, the Chancellor, Somaiya Vidyavihar University, Ms. Meeta Rajivlochan Madam, the Member Secretary, National Commission for Women, Government of India, Professor M Rajivlochan ji, Professor, Department of History, Punjab University, Dr. Naresh Chandra, Director, Education, B.K. Birla College, Kalyan, Dr. Vijay Joshi, Chief Consultant, RUSA, Maharashtra, the colleagues from the various institutions, Dr. Maninder Dhaliwal, Vice Principal of B.K. Birla College, Kalyan, Mr. Kiran Raikar, the librarian from our college, our IT team, dear colleagues, and dear students. We extend our heartfelt thanks to Shri Sudhir Shrivastava ji, the Chairman Maharashtra Pollution Control Board, for sparing his valuable time despite his busy schedule and participating in the panel discussion. Our sincere thanks are also due to Shri Samir Somaiya, the Chancellor, Somaiya Vidyavihar University, a great visionary from the field of academics, for giving his valuable inputs during today's panel discussion. We wish to express our sincere thanks and our gratitude towards Ms. Meeta Rajivlochan, the Member Secretary, National Commission for Women, Government of India, and Professor M Rajivlochan, the Professor, Department of History, Punjab University, the authors of the book Making India Great Again, for giving us the opportunity to organize today's panel discussion and sparing their valuable time with us. Dr. Naresh Chandra, sir, the Director Education, BK Birla College, Kalyan, is always a constant source of inspiration to all of us at BK Birla College. We express our sincere thanks for all his guidance and support to organize today's panel discussion. Dr. Vijay Joshi, the Chief Consultant, RUSA Maharashtra, is always there to motivate, help, and support our all endeavors. We also express our sincere thanks to him. We thank all the invited guests, faculty members, IT team, students for attending today's panel discussion. Once again, our heartfelt thanks to each one and everyone. Thank you very much. Before we end, our director, Dr. Naresh Chandra sir, want to add one sentence. So please, director sir.
I am only saying that we want to take it forward. Professor Rajeev ji Lochan and Meeta ji Lochan. And one step in that direction is that under the chairpersonship of respected Srimati Nirja ji Birla, we have started a new course, Postgraduate Diploma in Global Education. And where only few persons from India are on that academic board. And Meeta ji Madam is one member of the academic board. And we as the NEP focuses on making of a teacher. And our effort is we take through this postgraduate diploma in global education, the young minds or the in-service persons, particularly for school education, we provide best of the teaching resource. So, Madam, thank you very much for that also. And we are highly obliged by presence of, participation of, and making this event success, all the four eminent resource persons. Thank you very much, Shrivastava ji, Samir bhai ji, Professor Rajeev ji Lochan, and Madam Meeta Lochan ji. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
डॉक्टर विजय जोशी बीच बीच में आता है. अरे डॉक्टर विजय जोशी मैडम के साथ इतना काम किया. I wanted to say few words. Dr. Vijay Joshi is also part and parcel of is a RUSA, you, and we all remember you, the work and what efforts you have taken.
Sir, I constantly remember working with him was an unforgettable experience actually.
Yes.
Throughout this 2-hour discussion, I constantly remembered we had all those discussions on courses on artificial intelligence और चर्चा की थी हमने. Hopefully कुछ तो मुकम्मल हुआ ही होगा.
Work is going on, madam, but there is a difference.
आपने यही कहा है ना, 100 चीजें करो 2 निकल के आएगी, वो 2 निकल के आ रही है मैडम. 100 चीजें कर रहे हैं.
Moving forward.
Thank you, sir. My best wishes and thank you so much for your help.
MPC great. And we want to continue our efforts in that direction.
Absolutely. Okay, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All our best.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.